This video is an introduction to dynamics of rigid bodies as a branch of mechanics. We will also learn the difference between kinematics and kinetics, a particle and a body. We will also define motion and identify its different types. Engineering mechanics may be defined as the science which considers the effects of forces on rigid bodies. It is divided into two parts: statics and dynamics. In statics, we consider the effects and distribution of forces on rigid bodies which are and remain at rest or having of constant velocity. On the other hand, dynamics is a branch of classical mechanics concerning the behavior and motion of objects when acted upon by certain forces. Statics is divided into two parts: force systems and its applications. For force systems, we will be tackling concurrent forces, parallel and non-concurrent forces, and so on. Its applications would be in the analysis of trusses, centroids, and friction. Dynamics is divided into two parts: kinematics and kinetics. In kinematics, we will be discussing translation, rotation, and plane motion. Kinetics, however, will be tackling about pressure, work, and force. Let us now focus on the branches of dynamics. Kinematics is the geometry of motion. The term describes the motion of the bodies and deals with finding out velocities or accelerations for various objects, without consideration of the forces causing the motion. On the other hand, kinetics deals with the forces or torque applied on a body that causes or is resulting from motion. When the acceleration of a body caused by the forces acting on it has been determined, the principles of kinematics may be applied to determine the displacement or velocity at any instant. In other cases, the kinematic motion of a body may be used to compute its acceleration. From this, by means of the relations to be developed later, the force or forces required to produce this motion can be determined. So basically, these two branches of dynamics are related to each other. Let us further differentiate the two branches of dynamics. Kinetics deals with the causes for the motion of the objects, while kinematics deals with the position, acceleration, and speed of an object. Kinetics takes into consideration the mass of the object, while kinematics does not take into consideration its mass. For kinetics, it takes forces explicitly into account because forces are the ones that causes motions of objects, while kinematics does not take forces explicitly into account. It is just curious on how objects behave under motion or when it is acted upon by certain forces. That's why it's called the geometry of motion. Kinetics does not have more mathematical expressions, while kinematics has more mathematical expressions. In the study of dynamics, we will often hear the two terms particle and body. That is why it is important for us to differentiate between the two. A rigid body may be defined as a body in which the relative positions of any two particles do not change under the action of forces. It is important, however, to note that no body is perfectly rigid. A body, when subjected to external forces, must undergo some form of deformation, however small it may be. The deformation of a body describes the relative displacement between particles of a body. A particle, on the other hand, is a body of infinitely small volume that is of negligible dimensions but having mass concentrated at a point. Such a body cannot exist theoretically. In other words, a particle is a body so small that any difference in the motions of its parts can be neglected. In simple terms, a body or a rigid body is an object of appreciable size. On the other hand, a particle is an object that has an infinitely small size. It seems confusing, right? But let us remember that the criterion of size is only relative. Consider the picture of the solar system. If you are an observer that is on the surface of the earth, then you may say that this object or the earth is something that is of an appreciable size. But what if you are an astronaut that is observing the solar system from afar? Then you may say that the earth is just a point or a particle in that case. The criterion of size is only relative because it depends on where the observer is. If you are an observer that is near the object being observed, then you may take it as something of an appreciable size or an object that is called a body. But if you are an observer that is very far from that specific object, then you may say that it is only a point or a particle in that case. That is why an object may be taken as a body and a particle in the same way or in the same time, depending on where the observer is. The criterion of size is only relative. Motion is the phenomenon in which an object changes its position over time. Motion is relative. When we say an object is at rest, we mean it is not moving with respect to the surface of the earth. A ball rolling is in motion relative to the plane surface of the floor. A boat sailing on the river moves with respect to the river's banks, but it also moves with respect to the flowing water in the river. To avoid confusion, it is important to relate motion to a frame of reference, usually thought of as fixed on the earth or fixed relative to the stars, in which the motion is measured. For many problems, it is convenient to use moving frames of reference. It is then necessary to specify the nature of the motion of the frame. The frame of reference generally takes the form of a set of coordinate axes in which the motion is pictured. There are basically three types of motion based on the consideration of the frame of reference. The first one would be rectilinear motion, when we require only one coordinate axis along with time to describe the motion of a particle. It is said to be in linear motion or rectilinear motion. Some examples of linear motion are a parade of soldiers, a train moving along a straight line, and many more. Another type of motion would be curvilinear motion, which is described as an object that is having a curved path of motion. An example of this would be objects under projectile motion. Lastly, rotational motion. It is characterized by different points moving at the same angle, the same direction, over the same period of time, but has different distance traveled. In the picture shown, the wind turbine has rotor blades. If you consider a point at the tip of the blade and a point near the center of the rotor, both of these points will move with the same angle, the same direction, over the same period of time. But the point at the tip of the blade will travel a greater angular distance as compared with the angular distance traveled by the point near the center of the rotor. We can also classify motion as either uniform or non-uniform. It is considered uniform motion when the moving particle is traversing equal distances at equal time intervals. It will be considered non-uniform or variable motion if the moving particle is traversing unequal distances at equal time intervals. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button and turn on the notification bell.